Chasing Giants with Don Higgins and Terry Peer. Brought to you by Osseo Camo, nature's most lethal camouflage. Follow along as Don and Terry discuss the techniques, strategies, and dedication needed to harvest one of God's most amazing creations, world-class whitetails.
Well, welcome everyone to the Chasing Giants podcast, episode 302, airing. We're already in the first week of December, Don. Late season's coming in. I want to kick this show off by talking about how many big bucks we've seen posted on social media as soon as this cold front came in that you were talking about. Snow on the ground, big bucks on Facebook. What's it mean?
Well, it was the perfect recipe for that late season hunting. You hunt over food sources, and those bucks hit the food source before dark in the afternoon, and that's when they're killing them. Like, they're not killing these bucks in the morning. It's always afternoon coming to those food sources. A lot of times the bucks are in the food source. I had somebody send me a message today that they've been hunting a buck all season, and he was pretty much nocturnal, even on the cameras. They weren't getting daylight pictures. And 2 of the last 3 days, he's been daylight at their food plot. So it's perfect recipe. And this is when, if you go to the trouble in the spring to plant your food plots, this is when the time of year when that grain is really key. Whether it's NutriCrave corn or the Gen 2 soybeans, now is the time when those two products really shine, and the deer are hitting them day after day after day, most days before dark in the afternoon. And if you've got it on your property, you're way ahead of the game, and you've probably got your neighbor's deer as well as your own.
Well, I want to dive into this a little bit. I know it's going to take up some time from the podcast, but I want to address the theory out there and get your opinion on something. There's this theory about bedding cover containing food sources. And to me, right now is a perfect reason why we do not want food sources inside of our bedding. You know, the woods, a lot of the acorns have been eaten, the browse has been nipped off, the green leaves are gone. Don, talk a little bit about why you believe, and you've kind of taught all of us that you've mentored as consultants, why we put this food source away and how impactful that is during deer season, especially late season.
Well, the real reason is really simple. Is you want that buck on his feet moving. You don't want him just to stand up and put his head down and start munching on clover or whatever that's growing in your switchgrass. I know that that's something that a lot of people promote, is clover within the switchgrass or your bedding grasses. I want that deer, when he's going to a food source, I don't want his bed and his food source together. I want him to stand up from his bed and have to travel at least a little bit to that food. And that makes him more vulnerable to hunting pressure. We're seeing on the properties that are set up good. My phone is just blowed up the last few days from clients sending me bucks that they've shot here, in the snow and the cold. All afternoon kills, all close to food sources or in food sources. And if you got that food and your bedding cover mixed, it puts you at a real disadvantage.
Yeah, it's been crazy. My clients have had an unbelievable year this year. I think there's been 6 booners, and I don't do that many properties. 6 booners killed, but this last just few days since, the cold front came in right about the time I was going to sunny Florida, the number of bucks killed, one of the properties in northern Ohio that I worked on, they've shot 6 mature. I'm talking mature bucks out of the same spot this season alone. And Don, it was a textbook example of what you've tried to instill into us, is put your bedding in one place, put your food in another place, and create a pinch point with great access between the two. And man, do these deer just pour right in front of a 360 blind, and they're popping them. Unbelievable to see how much, if we have the right balance of food and the bedding set up. Go into a little bit of explanation as we talk about the need for food, greening grains when it gets cold. Let's talk a little bit about thermal cover, where it relates to your wooded cover, like your big wooded sanctuary, and the switchgrass, maybe even the topography inside of that, and what those deer are looking for when it comes to bedding when the temperatures get down.
Yeah, before we jump into that bedding cover, a couple more quick thoughts on the food. It's really important that you have enough food to get through the winter, because you can train the local deer in your area that you are the place to go this time of year, and you'll just draw in more and more deer. And as time goes by, as the years go by, you just attract those deer from a farther distance, and they just learn that when things get rough, this is the property to go to. So small food plots aren't going to cut it. You need acres, you need that grain, and you need green diversity, as you just talked about, Terry. If you can have some fruit trees that drop their fruit late. There's apple varieties that still have apples on the tree that are falling. It just all adds up to a great opportunity to kill deer that were not even on your property during the rut. New deer showing up. I get more new deer showing up here in December and January than I do in the rut. And it's because of that I built this over about, we're pushing over 30 years now. And the local deer they just keep coming and keep coming. So it's not you do it once and you see the results, and that's the results you're going to have. Your results keep getting better year after year after year. On the bedding cover side of things, diversity again is huge. You don't want just wooded cover or just switchgrass. A combination. Conifers, great thermal cover. The deer can get up underneath those in high winds and storms and such, and ride out the storm. But a little bit of topography as well, where they can get on the downwind side of a ridge and get out of the wind a little bit. But the other thing they'll do is they'll not only, especially those days like what we got here today, it's cold but it's real sunny, and if they can get out of the wind and lay in the sun both, that's just a double attraction. So that diversity of bedding cover, diversity of terrain, the same thing applies. I did actually a short video on this a couple of winters ago when I was on a consultant's property. It was wintertime, but it was unusually warm the day I was there. And we were jumping in, and that property had some really good terrain features. And we were jumping some deer, but all the deer we were jumping were on north facing slopes. People get all wrapped up in south facing slopes for winter bedding cover. Yeah, that is exactly where the deer want to be when it's cold, colder than normal especially. But what about those days when it's 20 degrees warmer than normal and those deer have those winter coats on? They want the north side of the slope where they can, stay more comfortable. So diversity in topography, diversity in the types of cover, that's key, as well as the diversity of food sources.
I really enjoy watching a couple YouTube channels on farming just because a lot of times I like the big, this huge equipment that some of these farmers using. I geek out over that, all of the technology that's in just the size of it. But I also watch another channel called Sunny Farms, and they're in South Dakota, I believe, but they raise row crop and cattle, big cattle farm. And I was watching one of their episodes the other day, and he was out feeding, and of course it's already blistering cold, up in South Dakota right now. And he drove up on an old pond, dried up pond. And Don, this pond wasn't real big. It was probably the size of probably about your size of your big red new shed that you built for your equipment, and not real deep, but those cattle were down in that pond tighter than what they would have been in a stock trailer going to, the market, one of these big cattle trailers. I mean, they weren't pushed in there. They went in there and got in there that tight on their own to get out of the wind. And I can't help but think that deer are finding topography, rows of miscanthus, thick switchgrass cover, conifers, brush piles, treetops, whatever it takes. Even if it's a creek ditch to get down out of that wind a little bit, might not be stacked in that tight like the cattle were. But I got to believe as we start looking at consulting jobs, all of us that are looking at putting, switchgrass field in or bedding cover in colder temperatures, watching where we can put those almost, wind breaks inside of that cover for different areas and then be able to funnel those out strategically into food sources where we hunt them. It makes a game changer for these properties.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it's not a matter of just providing bedding cover and providing food. It's how it's laid out. And
picking the angles.
Exactly. Where you can play the wind, where you can give the deer the wind and yet still be playing the wind, where you got good access. And, if the deer can stay hidden as they're traveling, you don't want them to travel across open cover because they're not going to do it, especially a mature buck. But give them that cover along their travel route, you can put those deer right in your lap.
Yeah, absolutely. So how much snow do you all have? I mean, I'll be honest with you. I'm sitting in about 84-degree weather, sunny. I was out on the Gulf 2 days ago catching fish. So I don't want to, I know you don't feel one bit jealous because you don't like that, but how much snow do you all have?
I'm gonna guess we probably got around 8 inches or so, but my driveways, my lane coming up to my house has got at least a foot in it, kind of drifted over. But it's supposed to be. I mean, today's a little bit above freezing. Next 2 days will be above freezing, so it's going away. But we got more than I care for.
So talk a little bit without making it everything a real world commercial. Explain to our new listeners why we designed Gen 2 soybeans for what you're having right now in Illinois with weather. We got snow on the ground's covered. Why is a shatter resistant bean so much more important for deer right now?
Well, the way the whole thing started was I discovered a long time ago through my good friend Todd Hewing the pulling power that soybeans have in the late season. Deer prefer them over anything this time of the year, anything, even corn. But, when I started planting food plots years ago, way before the days of real world, I was just getting soybean seed from my neighbors. Whatever they had left over in their planter, they'd give me enough to plant my food plots. And some years it worked out great, but some years that soybean pod would shatter or burst open and the grain would drop on the ground and it would either be in mud or snow, and the deer obviously can't eat it that way. So if you've got soybeans right now where the pods have shattered open, the grain itself is down in the snow, that's doing the deer no good whatsoever. So real world soybeans were literally designed for the conditions we have right now.
Yeah. Getting that bean up above all of that and keeping it in the pod so that they can come by and browse on it. So, all right, let's take a quick break and go visit with Osseo. Make sure you're checking out Chasing Giants TV on our YouTube channel. We just released Joe Miles's 204-inch South Texas buck hunt. It released this just a few days ago, so make sure you go out and check that out on YouTube. Just an absolute hammer. Joe was down there doing some testing of the poofy or puffy, depending on how you say it, jacket. I know that's one of both of our favorite garments, but he wanted to test it in conditions where it was a very humid cold to see what it did with that special material that he puts on it. So go out and check out Chasing Giants TV YouTube channel and Joe Miles's 204-inch South Texas buck hunt. We'll be right back.
Osseo gear was forged by apex predators. Our two camo patterns are built from nature's most lethal hunters and designed to vanish anywhere in the whitetail's range. Our Raptor pattern draws inspiration from the unique feather patterns of a great horned owl, while our Rapix pattern is derived from the patterns of bobcats, coyotes, mountain lions, and wolves. But camo's just the start. Every detail of our gear is engineered for bow hunters. From our patent-pending bow hunting collar to our premium fabrics that keep you quiet, dry, and dialed in all seasons. Osseo gear is made to last, with our lifetime warranty standing behind every stitch. Visit Osseo Gear and use code CHASINGGIANTS for 15% off your first order. That's ASIOgear.com.
All right, we're back, Don. We talked about the snow a little bit. Let's do some housekeeping things right now. And why don't you talk a little bit about our dealer event coming up in February? Because I know most of our dealers listen to the podcast, but we might have some people out there that are interested in being a dealer. So we got some special things planned for that.
Yeah, it's February 25th and 26th in Arthur. We're actually calling it a whitetail management conference. I've got some good speakers coming in. Dr. Aaron Gaines, Dr. Clifford Shipley, going to talk about nutrition in depth. We're going to talk about, the theme for the event is real science, real results. And I'm positive that most people, including our dealers, don't understand the science behind some of our nutrition products. And I would stack our nutrition products up against anything in the entire animal feed industry.
Not just deer hunting.
Absolutely. Dr. Aaron Gaines, who developed our Expect Healthy Deer technology, is an animal nutritionist, and his feed company literally is in, or their feed is in more hogs in the United States than it's not. So it's he knows exactly what he's doing, and it's going to be a great opportunity for people to come and learn about it. A lot of other topics as well. You got to be a dealer or a dealer's guest to attend. There's no charge. It's free food. It starts at, I think, either 1 or 2 p.m. on the 25th, and then it'll end at noon the next day. So that gives people time to drive in, and also drive in one day and then drive home the next afternoon, evening. With just one night away from home in the motel. But good food, just it's going to be totally different than the two previous events that we've had. No doubt it's going to be bigger. We're going to have some of our partners there. I know Jim Reitzel with the Miscanthus planter is going to be there. The dealers that sell Miscanthus, they can either offer a planting service using these planters. You could plant thousands. I'd hate to guess how many thousands of rhizomes you could plant a day with one of those planters. But you could also buy one and rent it out if you're a dealer. Rent it out so much a day to your customers, make money that way. He'll be there with those. I'm guessing Novix will be there, 360 will be there. Might have grub equipment. They're not that far away. Have them come in. So it'll be more than just real world. Lots of informative stuff. We just designed a new notebook that's a spiral bound notebook that'll be given to everybody that's there, covering all kinds of things, not just real world products, but you name it, it's covered in there. I should have just written a book and had a book published on food plots and land management. Is what I should have done, because I've spent literally about 4 months working on that thing with Steve Shields, and we're finally getting it wrapped up. But everybody will get one of those for free. Not sure yet what all else is going to be there, but there's going to be a bunch that's packed into those 2 days.
Yep, absolutely. So just a ton of business to business networking. Also, that's one of the things we strive to is for our dealers, we bring in other people to help you have other products and other revenue streams with our connections in the industry. So is he reaching for a sample?
Sorry, I backed up. I want to give people a phone number. If they're interested in coming to this, they can call the Real World office, which is 217-943721. And if you're not a dealer yet, that's fine. You can put your first order in and pick that order up at that event, save shipping costs. So if you're not a dealer yet, that doesn't mean you can't come. You can sign up, pick your first order up there.
Yep. So appreciate everybody's patience as we talk about it, but it's a huge event for our family of dealers. We want you to be successful. Our strategy is to grow through small businesses and help support you guys as much as we can and be a blessing to you guys like we have been blessed ourselves. So one other big announcement is we have a new job opening available. I posted it on social media this week. We are hiring a marketing content creator person now that we have Real World, Green Prairie Seed, and helping out a little bit with Chasing Giants since this has gotten so big. We're trying to bring in some additional help for content creation. So please do not send your resume or call Don, because this has already happened 30 times in 2 days. Asking questions about this. We're dividing and conquering on this position. So Don is just going to tell you to send your resume to me. So I'm going to give you my email address. We'll have a public job posting so you can review the requirements, but basically you need to be able to film, edit, and create both video, photos, and manage social media. So experience in those 3 pillars is vital with or without formal education. If you're more interested in learning more about that, send an email to terry@realworldwildlifeproducts.com. Terry, Terry, at realworldwildlifeproducts, plural, products.com, and I will get you some more information in the job posting, the everything like that. So Don is just going to tell you to call me if you call him.
And probably should add that whoever gets this job will need to relocate to the Arthur, Illinois area. You're going to have an office there at our facility. And this is not a remote job. If you're not willing to relocate to the Arthur area, don't bother applying.
Correct. It's not even in the cards. We are investing a ton of money in photography and video equipment, having a studio, the whole works. So there's so much filming that needs to be done on site, not only with the process of packaging, treating, educating people on the quality of the seed, but also at the growers out on the field and as we plant and test. This is going to encompass everything from the deer hunting industry to the agriculture industry to even, just non-deer habitat with CRP programs. Just so many different things that this is going to open the door for a very, very cool job creating content for us. And hey, you get to work with Don and I every day. How about that?
Well, we just scared off every potential employee or candidate right there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, if you got any questions or want to talk more about that, we've gotten a bunch of resumes in that I'm going to be batch going through. We are also entertaining the possibility of a last semester co-op that's getting ready to graduate. So if you know somebody that's in college right now that needs a job that fits this requirement with maybe a media communications, social media type degree, great opportunity for them to even possibly co-op with us before we're coming on full time. This is a job that is full time with vacation, benefits, health insurance, and retirement. So big opportunity for someone who wants to get into this industry and have some fun with producing some content for us, right?
Absolutely. So I know there's a lot of young people that are looking to get into the hunting industry. This is not exactly the hunting industry, but it kind of is, because whoever gets this position is actually going to be doing some filming on my farm with me. And who knows, if I find a giant buck, I might even drag you along and put you in a tree. But there's enough with green prairie and real world that you're going to be pretty busy.
Yeah, we promised the owners of the company that this would not be Don's full-time cameraman, but we'll see. It depends on the circumstances involved and all of that. So anyway, reach out to me, Terry, at realworldwildlifeproducts.com. You got anything else before we go to our Higgins hot seat segment?
I just wanted to say that I started my consulting visits this week. Got two in, one in Illinois, one in Indiana, and got a full schedule for this coming week. But I say this every year, and I got to repeat it again, because of the two clients that I've met with so far. We meet the greatest people doing this. I mean, just the most down-to-earth, humble, generous, just great people. I was just thinking on my way home today, I've got the best job on the entire planet.
Yep.
Doing what I do.
I will say that I think I can go ahead and say what we're thinking because I'm not committing to this. But Lester's Feet is going to have a unbelievable fundraiser this coming year in 2026. And all I'm really going to say is that it involves a hunt in South Texas. But before we open this up, Austin Razor and I are going to drive from the Cincinnati area where he lives east of Cincinnati. I live south of Cincinnati. We're driving to South Texas and going to hunt the location that basically to vet it out and film it, take pictures of it, and make sure it's what we want to offer as a fundraiser. Hopefully that we can release the details of in Shipshewana. But if that is the only time we get a lot of requests for me to go outside of that 2-3 hour radius. If anybody listening from between Cincinnati and South Texas, down through Missouri, Arkansas, Oklahoma, or making the loop, around that southern corner of Kansas, that will be the only time that I'm interested in doing something that's not in my normal geographic territory. So reach out if you're interested into that.
Yeah, Shipshewana is going to be huge this year. Just a lot of new things. I don't know if we're ready to talk about it yet. We'll wait till Derek gives us the word. But make your reservations, your motel reservations now for Shipshewana. I think the dates are February 19th, 20th, and 21st. But there's going to be things there that's never happened before. I hope to see you all there.
Absolutely. And we'll be able to talk a little bit about it, but trust us, you're going to want hotel reservations. That's the thing you got to get now. All right, moving on to the Higgins hot seat, sponsored by 360 Blinds. I did find out before I asked you the question, Don, you would not believe how many of those Chasing Giants blinds that 360 sold with the Ossia metal on the sides. They have ordered new rolls of material to wrap these things in. So production is going to continue on this product. So we're really happy about that. Happy that the people that's got them have had a great experience with them. It's by far the best blind I've ever seen. So make sure you check that out at 360 on their website and social media. But Don, I have a question about the late season again this week. And then last week I asked you about the most brutal conditions that you ever personally hunted. I want to kind of twist that same topic, and maybe it's more observations that you've seen when you've burned your switchgrass or you've shed hunted after a hard winter like that. What are some things that you saw as you walked through your farm during shed hunting season or while you've burned switchgrass that truly show how deer are using cover to survive in that late season when we got that brutal wind, sub-zero temperatures? And then I want you to break off a little bit about this and talk about, will deer travel less? Will their range shrink? If they have a good food source and good bedding with that cover, does it almost go back to like bachelor group range where they bed really close to that food again? So big thing to unpack for you here in this one.
Well, I think it was just last week or the week before we was talking about does on my property and how the does were gone. And, I think I mentioned West Delks had 6 hunts where he only seen 3 total antlerless deer. And then he was hunting right before this cold and snow hit. Well, now that the cold and snow is here, all the does have come back.
Wow.
And not only have they come back, but my cameras are literally getting more than double the pictures they were during the rut. The deer are here in mass around these food sources, and it just goes back to what we were saying earlier. If you've got the food and you've got good cover, you're going to have the deer, and you're going to have more than you do at any other time of the year. But, I remember it was back about 2010 or so, like 15 or so years ago. It was in late January, about the last week of January, we got an ice storm. And, usually you get an ice storm and that ice only lasts a day or two and it's gone. But this particular storm was probably the worst ice storm that I've seen. Like it was like fence wire, for example. That ice formed around the wires and it was the size of, it was bigger than a pencil and probably not quite as big as like a broom handle, but big. And then the soybean stalks in my food plots were just covered with ice, the pods, the stalk, and everything, to the point where, if a deer would eat a pod, he was eating an ice cube with a pod in the middle of it. And last week of January, typically the bucks there may be 1 or 2 shed that time of year, but most of them are going to hold on, till the end of February, early March. But that winter, it was really, because of that ice, I think every buck on my farm shed his antlers in like a week because the deer didn't come out to the food plots. They just stayed hunkered down in the brush, and I didn't even see where they was nibbling on those ice-covered branches. It's just like they went into hibernation and they just quit moving and they quit eating and they shed their antlers in that thick cover. And I remember a couple places going in and bringing out antlers by the handsful because those antlers were not scattered across miles of open ag country. Those antlers were all right there, right in the bedding cover. Not even in the food plots. They was all right in the bedding cover. And it basically demonstrated for me 15 years ago the importance of having that good cover on the farm was, and I knew it at that point, but that just drove the point home that bedding cover at this time of the year is almost as important as the food. But you really need both. And if you've got both, you've got it made this time of year.
Will those bucks' range shrink when they find something that's got the thermal cover and the food? Will they start shrinking their range almost back to where it's like bachelor group?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they're not wandering across the countryside. The good thing about what we're experiencing right now is we are right in the middle of our second firearm season. So we got 2 more days from when we're recording this. But this weather has all the local deer piled into my place and on the food sources, bedding on my property. I'm not seeing, as I drive around the section, it's very, very few tracks coming and going off of my place. The deer are here, they're staying here, which is really going to help them survive this gun season, which bodes well for the bucks that I'm hoping to save that are on this place. I had a couple new bucks show up as well, and I expect more. to be honest, before, especially if this weather holds. And as I look at the extended forecast, it doesn't look like we're going to have a warm up for the next 10 days. I just looked at the 10-day forecast before we got on here, and the temperatures, there's going to be days where it gets above freezing, but we got some more snow in the forecast too. And we got some days it's not going to be above freezing. If it stays like this, the deer are going to shed early, and those antlers are going to be more concentrated around the cover and the food sources instead of those wide open ag fields where those deer are just going here, there, and everywhere. That could all change. I mean, we're a long ways from normal time for a deer to be shedding his antlers. We're still a full 2.5 months from then. It'd usually be late February, and here we are early December. So we're a long ways from when they would typically shed. But the weather pattern that I'm seeing could cause some early shedding for sure. Something else I ought to throw out here while we're talking about this. You know, we've talked about how I shot a bunch of does last year on my farm, and that really increased the buck activity and the rutting sign that I seen on my farm this year. The other thing it did is these bucks must be fighting like crazy, because I don't hardly have a deer here that does not have busted up antlers. And some of them are I mean, really, really busted up.
Do you think that's more competition for fewer number of does?
I think so. I think those bucks are on their feet more looking, because they're not with the hot doe. They're looking for a hot doe, and they're just encountering each other a whole lot more, and they're getting their heads together, and they're duking it out. And I mean, I've got one really, really nice 3-year-old. He's just a clean 10-pointer. Doesn't have much extra, but he's a wide, big framed 3-year-old 10-pointer that busted off his whole antler right past the brow. So right now, all he's got left on the one side is just a brow tine, and then it's gone from there. And he's been like that for, I don't know, probably 3 weeks or so anyway, maybe 4 weeks since early November. But then he comes back and he's busted tines off the other side.
Still fighting with one antler.
So I had a buck come by the other day that he'd busted some tines, and one of his eyes, he must have got gouged in the eye. One of his eyes was swollen and closed, and like dripping pus or whatever. So the bucks have definitely. I think there's when it comes to managing the number of does on a property, there's a balance that you want to have. You don't want to have too many where the bucks are hardly moving during the rut, that they just go from one doe to the next, and very, very difficult to kill. But if you have too few, well, then they're going to range just a little bit farther and be off of your property a little more as they're on their feet looking, but they're also busting each other's racks up and injuring each other. And I got another buck here that's injured really bad. Wes seen him when he was hunting here and told me about him. And then I took a young man from church hunting one day. Was it this week or last week? I don't remember, but we seen the same buck that Wes was talking about that was injured and was not even using one of his front legs. He was holding that front leg up and just kind of hobbling along. So this season has been hard on my bucks.
Do you have enough data, or have you made enough observations to decide whether you're going to kill any more does or not?
Yeah, the only way I'm killing another doe is if she comes by and she's got button bucks with her. If anything else, no.
Gotcha.
But if there's one with twin buck fawns, yeah, I'll shoot that one.
Gotcha. All right, sounds good. Thanks for 360 Blinds to sponsoring the Higgins Hot Seat segment. We're going to come right back with the Midwest Land Group listener-submitted questions. We'll be right back.
Does your real estate agent know the difference between a rub and a scrape? Or did they ask how many deer you caught this year? At Midwest Land Group, our agents evaluate the land the way serious hunters do, because it's exactly who we are. From surveys, soil types, floodplains and easements, to timber quality, tree stands, access, and food plots. Whether you're interested in buying or selling, work with an agent who speaks your language. Visit MidwestLandGroup.com to connect with one today. Midwest Land Group. Buyers, sellers, land. Connected.
Okay, our first question comes from Benjamin Maines from McVeytown, Pennsylvania. It says, Don, I'd like to congratulate you on yet another 200-inch whitetail and taking off your home farm. My question is, once your new projects are completed on your farm, will you be hosting field days there as you did in years past? If so, when do you expect to announce this? Last questions, when do you expect to sell the 430 acres in Morgan County? Will it be sold as one property or broken off into smaller pieces? And how is the progress on this land going? Well, the 430 in Morgan County, Ohio was sold some time back. We do have a 383 acre property. I think it's in Jackson County that is ready to sell. And we've got a 75 acre in Scioto County, Ohio that's ready to sell. I get a lot of questions about, am I going to do these on-site master classes on my farm? That's why I picked this question, just so everybody can hear the answer. I've been back and forth on whether I want to do that or not. If I do at some point in the future, I'd say there's a fairly good chance I am going to do that. For multiple reasons. Obviously, it makes good money, but it also gives the public a chance to see the property. And there's a lot of rumors out there about this property and mystique around it. There's somebody that compared it to Area 51 in New Mexico with the UFOs, and I don't know if it's got that much mystique around it. But if I do it, it's going to be a little different. I think I'll probably rig up a rack wagon with some benches on it and pull it around, and we'll just do the tour. There probably won't be the classroom thing, maybe a morning tour, a lunch, and then the lunch will include both the morning class and the afternoon class. But that's not going to happen this year. I don't know when it's going to happen. I got some projects that I'd like to do before that happens. Also, some of the new plantings I've done, new tree plantings, I'd like for them to get a little more size on them. So it'll be a whole lot easier to see the benefits and exactly what I'm trying to accomplish with those. I'd say there's a good chance at some point in the future I'm going to.
Yeah. It's the other thing I don't think people understand is a lot of the content that we covered in the masterclass. Now that this podcast is 302 episodes, you can get it for free right here if you're listening and following along. It's crazy that you would think that we'd run out of stuff to talk about, but so much of that content, the only nice thing about the master class was you got it in the classroom and then you got to go actually look at it. Why this tree versus a tree 12 yards from this, and it's a lot more visual for people like me that don't read very well. I have very, very poor reading comprehension skills. And when I see it, it makes a whole lot more sense. So, yeah, we'll consider it, but like you said, I think it needs a different format if we do it. I know there's a lot of people that came to the first one that want to come back and see how you've, added on to it and how you've built that into the plan. So I think a different strategy is probably in order, like you said. But yeah, we'll look forward to hopefully doing that at some point in time.
Yeah, if I would do it today, like before, the walk that we went on before, that walk today would be about 3 times as long, just because I've extended my farm. It's not 3 times bigger, but it's longer and narrower, and it would probably be close. My farm is like 1.6 miles from one end to the other, and along a creek. And if we made that jaunt and did the weaving in and out of different things, you'd be looking at about 4 miles of walking to get that done. Yeah. So it'll be different if we do it.
Yep. All right. Here's the next question.
This one comes from Drew Harmon from Floyd, Virginia. It says, Dear Don, when you get a new permission property to hunt in the off season, do you usually, after scouting, put a stand in place? I feel like most of the time I'll go in late winter, do my scouting, and then get a stand in place by spring, and then stay out until it's time to hunt. The problem I'm running into is that I'm hanging a lot of stands and cameras on properties that look good but are not producing a mature buck to hunt. I'm starting to rethink the approach and maybe wait until I have a shooter show up before I hang a stand so I don't waste valuable time on properties that aren't producing. Would love to hear your approach. Thanks and God bless. Well, Drew, what you explained there is exactly what I've done in the past. I'd get permission and I'd scout it in the off season, and I'd get a stand or two in there and then run cameras. And then if a shooter buck showed up, I was set to go, and I'd just slip in and start hunting. And sometimes, I may not hunt till 2, 3, 4 years after I hung the stands. And I'm using chains, not strap-on stands, so I wasn't too worried about straps rotting or anything like that. A lot of times I use metal ladder stands too, so safety really wasn't too much of a concern. But what's happened here is kind of what you described, where I had stands all over the place. I think at one time I had like 60 stands scattered around the countryside. But because of the the poor or the downturn in the quality of the Illinois deer herd, a lot of those properties, I've got properties I've had cameras on for over a decade, over 10 years, that I've never hunted a single time because there's never been a buck that interests me there. So I had to change my approach because I was hanging stands here, there, and everywhere and never hunting them and never having a buck show up. And it just became a futile effort. And so now I get in there and I pick the tree out where I'm going to put my stand. And, I'll have it marked on my OnX with some notes and such. And I'll run cameras. And then if a shooter shows up, well, boom, I get in there and I know I don't have to scout. I don't have to stomp the place up. I know exactly the tree I'm going to. And I look at my notes and see what else I might need to do. But I no longer just go around the countryside putting up stands just to be ready in case one shows up.
I think there's another factor there too that's allowed you to implement that strategy change, and that is when you started using like the Novix the climbing sticks, the ability to go in and very quietly get up into a tree and hunt it is not like it used to be when you were talking about when you had all these stands scattered out all over. So everybody looks at a Novix stand and says, oh my goodness, how expensive is that? But you're not buying 50, 60 of them to go around anymore. You can prep your spot. And man, we're not mobile hunters by any means, people. We don't claim to be, the guys that can run around and go crazy like that. That's cool. That's not us. But man, I remember I was with you the first time you ever used a set of Novix climbing sticks, and you were like, my goodness, is this easy?
They're solid. I mean, that's what surprised me. They look kind of, I don't know. I was just surprised at how solid they were once that stick is locked into place. But I think I got, 5 or 6 different Novix stands and sticks for each one. And that's exactly how I use them. They're just sitting there waiting on me to find a big buck, and I run in there and I'll hang and hunt. And I may come back the next time with another Novix to the same property, but a different wind direction to a different tree that I've previously picked out and hang it. And, that's why I have 5 or 6 of them, because then I leave them. Once I get them up, I leave them for the season because I'll come back and hunt them again. Right. And
but it just prevents you from leaving stands in the tree for 3, 4, 5, 6 years that you never hunt, wasting all that money on it, time on it. But prepping that spot ahead of time so that if you ever do need to go up in it, you got that. So it's quite a change in technology and product innovation that's kind of helped us a little bit in that area.
Right. All right, this one comes from Brent Chase from New Vienna, Ohio. Says, I have a question about rope scrapes. I have a small food plot with a set blind location that is downwind from the field, 90% of most wind directions. I'm not sure how that's possible, but anyway, I have 5 mature pin oaks around this field. One of the oaks has a low-hanging branch frequented by almost all mature deer about 30 yards from the blind. Over 80 yards from the blind, another natural scrape seems to be more frequently used. I want to put a rope scrape on the low pin oak branch that is 30 yards from the blind. Would it be a good idea to cut out all branches and used for the scrape that is 80 yards from the blind, fully eliminating it? Would this work to push the deer to use the rope scrape closer to the blind? Yeah, I think that's a great idea, Brent. I'm not sure I understand that you got a stand that works for 90% of winds. I'm thinking maybe you meant 90% of days with prevailing winds that, maybe you can hunt it that way. But I've never seen a situation where you can hunt 90% of the 360-degree possible wind directions. But anyway, I think you got a great idea. I would definitely go cut those other scrape branches off and force those deer to use the one in shooting range of your blind.
Yeah, create the social interaction in a different place by, eliminating it in certain places and promoting it in others. I think it's a tool a lot of people use. But yeah, I don't know about 90. Maybe it's just 90% of the time, not 90% of the wind, maybe. Mm-hmm. All right.
Next one comes from Montana Moritz from Brookville, Indiana. It says, Don, my question has to do with a new to me regulation in my home state. I'm from southeast Indiana. A few years back, we were hit by EHD pretty hard, and the state has tightened up on antlerless harvest quite a bit. I primarily bow hunt, so this is the first year that I realized that a gun tag is only good for an antlered deer. I try my best to manage my farm for mature bucks, but I still let my closest family members hunt and enjoy the outdoors with me. My father purchased a firearms tag and has had to let many does walk by as he cannot legally harvest them. He's waiting for the first deer with horns so he can have the meat he wants. What is your opinion on this? Am I crazy for thinking this is a completely out of touch rule that gets younger age class bucks harvested unnecessarily? Or is the state protecting antlerless deer the correct way to go? My area has an abundance of antlerless deer, and even as a landowner, I'm only allowed 2 per season. You can buy an extra bonus antlerless tag. However, the gun tag you already have is buck only. I'm realizing that lots of gun hunters do not want to purchase both tags and are just shooting antlered deer for meat. Well, Montana, that's a situation that's going to vary from property to property. I seen Todd Hewing make a post this week. He owns 2 different properties. They're 20 some miles apart, 28, I think he posted. One of them got hit with EHD and does not need a deer harvested on it. The other one is overrun with does, and he can shoot all he wants. And I think that, the state is looking at things from a 30,000 foot level, and they're trying to come up with regulations that on average are going to, fit the most properties and the most situations. I think every state out there could do a better job of managing their deer herd, every single one of them. Even Iowa, it probably does the best job, but they've got things that I would definitely change if I was in charge of that deer herd. There's no reason why you should have people shooting 3 bucks in a state, which a landowner in Iowa can do. So every state has got regulations that I would change. But in the state's defense, they're not trying to manage your property. They're trying to manage the entire state. What might be good for your property is bad on 80% of the other properties in the states.
Right.
You got to kind of look at it from their angle too. Now, I'm a guy that's bashed DNR probably more than anybody listening to this in the past, but as you realize that sometimes their hands are tied by legislators that pass legislation and tried to manage our deer herds from the legislative side instead of as a biologist. So there's a lot of different factors that come into play there. You also got the fact that there's different constituency groups in the state that want different population levels.
Right.
Hunters typically want a lot of deer. Farmers want none.
Right.
Insurance companies want none. So they're trying to balance a lot of different interests too in their defense.
Okay. We'll pull up the last question of the episode right here.
All right, this one is from Bryce Despain from Carlinville, Illinois. It says, hi, Don and Terry. Thank you for your willingness to share your knowledge of deer and your love for Christ. Wes posted early November to always bet on the deer, and I have continued to do that without tagging a mature buck in several years. Don, last week you mentioned you have a 10% chance of killing a buck if he isn't bedding on your property. I have since learned my neighbor, whose property is covered in CRP, has good bedding cover. He is also an avid bow hunter with plenty of time to hunt. I have consistently had several promising 3 and 4 year old bucks, only to never see them at 5. I know the neighbor holds a ton of deer with 20 plus acres of CRP and lets deer walk until 5. I am starting to think we both let them walk and he shoots them when they get to age, and I never get a shot. I hunt a permission property that is row crop farmed up to the timber edge. My question is, without taking a dozer into the woods and flattening 5 acres, is there any way to increase the likelihood of mature buck bedding on my property? I cannot drastically change the landscape because I do not own the property. I didn't know if there were any out-of-the-box ideas you've done with consulting clients or yourself. You've done. Sorry, spelling or something there. On permission properties with true land management can be limited. Thank you for considering my question. Well, you know, a lot of landowners will let you do things like TSI, timber stand improvement. They don't want you in there cutting oaks and walnuts, obviously, but if you explain to them that the benefits of taking out some of those trash species, box elder, ash, which are going to die in Illinois anyway if they're not already dead.
Beech trees.
Yeah, beech, hackberry, maples, just the list goes on and on of trees that could be cut. And it improves the bedding cover, but it also improves the growth rate of the good timber that you leave behind. So it's actually doing a benefit for both you as a deer hunter, but also the landowner in terms of timber harvest down the road. It'll increase the growth rates, and he'll be able to harvest his timber quicker. So that's what I would do, is approach the landowner about that. Other than that, without planting, switchgrass or something like that, which he's not going to let you do if he's a farmer. Probably not anyway, no matter what he is. Most people utilize their acreage to something that interests them or benefits them. So, unfortunately, your hands are tied. But, you got a situation that I run into a good little bit, really, where, a client will say, I get my bucks to 3 years old and they always disappear. I never see them again when they're 4 years old. And there's a reason for that. A 3-year-old is big enough that he can find a place where he's top dog in most of the Midwest. That doesn't mean he's the biggest buck in the neighborhood, but he can find a little woodlot or, hedgerows or something where he's the biggest buck living there on a daily basis. And he will seek out those places. But, once he starts getting older, he becomes the more dominant buck, if not the dominant buck in the area. Well, he's going to go to the most secure place that he can find. And it sounds like your neighbor is doing a great job of managing his farm. And when those bucks reach maturity, they're just living on him. And you got to remember, those bucks are not relocating to a new range. They're using the same range they've always had, but they're using it differently in different parts of that range. So they just didn't move to his property when they turned 4 and they'd never been there before. They were there already. And it's just as they got older and they become more reclusive and don't move in daylight as much, and security starts meaning more to them than anything else, they're going to pick the place where they're the safest.
Yep, absolutely. All right, great questions submitted by our listeners this week. If you got more questions that you want us to consider on the show, submit them at chasinggiants.com, and you get a free t-shirt when we use one on air. If you have not received your t-shirt, just be patient. We submit those to our partner that does our apparel, and they ship them out directly. So just be patient. It'll get there, I promise. So I got a couple housekeeping things. Dad is finishing up his series on divorce, and we ended up extending that to 4 different episodes. The history of where some of the narratives have come from that's in our churches was session 2. What Jesus said specifically about marriage, divorce, and remarriage in the Bible is 3, and we'll be recording what the apostles said about it in session 4 that drops next Wednesday. So make sure you check out the Chasing Assurance podcast. It releases every Wednesday on audio platforms and here on YouTube. And then this week's Sunday night prayer time is done by Emerson Day. So stick around after Don closes us out with this episode and listen to what Emerson has to say before just to encourage us and pray over everybody together as we start off a new week.
I actually, on my drive this morning to the consulting visit, I listened to the first in this series on divorce with the Chasing Assurance podcast. Very interesting. I encourage people to listen to it. And now that I'm on the road, I'll get to catch up. Have a lot of road time to listen to the rest of them. I want to throw out a note about the T-shirts that Terry mentioned. Folks, if you submit a question and you don't fill the form out properly, you're not getting a T-shirt. Don't contact me 6 months later and say, I didn't get my T-shirt because you didn't fill things out properly. I've just got too much on my plate to be going back and digging through old podcast outlines to see what the problem was. And if it gets lost in the mail, submit another question. You submit another good question, we'll pick it and you'll get your T-shirt. But it seems like we've had a lot of those lately. But anyway, I hope you guys get out in the woods this week. here in the Midwest, we've got some fantastic conditions for deer movement in the afternoon towards those food sources. So hope you get a chance to take advantage of that. And we'll see you back here next week. God bless.
Chasing Giants has been brought to you by Osseo Camo. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode of Chasing Giants.
Hey, it's Emerson, and I'm in Nashville this week doing some writing and some other stuff too, but mostly writing. And so I have been just digging for new ideas and just things God is teaching me and showing me in my life. And, just going back and reading through some of the Bible stories that I've book noted as ideas and things like that. And there was one that really stood out this week that we ended up writing a song about a couple days ago. And it just was such a great reminder to me of the bar that is set for our faith, and also just a reminder of God's faithfulness as well. And so it was the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And the brief paraphrasing of this story is the king at the time made a command that this statue he set up, anytime music was played, you were supposed to bow down and worship the statue. And if you didn't, you would be thrown into a blazing furnace. And so at the time, everyone was doing this except for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And they basically are tattletaled on. There was somebody that went to the king and told on them and said, hey, they don't respect you at all. They're not following your commands, and they're not bowing down and worshiping the statue. And so the king brings them in and says, look, I'm going to give you one last chance. You can bow down and you can worship the statue, or you can not, and I will throw you into the blazing furnace. And so that's kind of the story. And the response that they give when the king presents them with this question. So basically, you can worship the statue and live, or you can not and die, was pretty much the severity of the situation. And the response that they give is like such a gangster response. He basically says, we do not have to concern ourselves. We don't have to defend ourselves about this matter to you. Like, basically saying, we don't even need to worry about this. Like, I don't have to defend myself. I don't have to say anything more. Like, we're not doing it, and we serve the one true God. And just without hesitation, just a complete unaffected statement, And so the story goes on that, they do not worship the idol. And so King Nebuchadnezzar says, okay, well, you're going into the fire. And so this is the first part of the story that really speaks to me, because I think that first response, I could say, that first response of, well, I know God has got it, so I'm not even going to worry myself about it. I feel like I could say that. But this part of the story, I can't imagine what it would feel like to walk up to the fire and the next step you have to take is in it. That is where I think I might say to myself, am I sure about this? Like, if there was ever a time to doubt, I think it would be in that moment. And what's crazy is, backing up just a little bit, he also says, after, we don't have to defend ourselves in this matter, he then says, our God is able to deliver us from the fire and from, your hand. But even if he does not, we will still not worship the statue. We will still worship the one true God. And that statement lets me know that they did not know how this was going to end. It's not like God gave them a clue ahead of time and said, hey, this is going to work out for you in the end. Like, they did not know, because the fact that he says, we know that he is able and we know that he can, but even if he doesn't, like, we're not sure how this is going to turn out. So I can't imagine walking up to that furnace, and the next step that you feeling the heat on your skin, it had to be so intense you probably couldn't even stand next to it, and you're looking at it going, my next step has got to be into that thing. And they go into the furnace. And when I think about the bar that is set for faith, this is one of the stories that is up there with me. And there are so many that do this, but I just put myself in that position and I think about it and the step that they took, just how strong their faith must have been. And so the story goes, there's a fourth man in the fire. God is with them in the fire and they're dancing around and the king calls them out. And one of the details that has always just stuck out to me that I thought was so cool, and this was one of the things that I brought into the writing room this week, was they were not burned, they were not harmed, their clothes and their hair were not singed. And then the last piece, it says they did not even smell like smoke. And to me, the fact that the Bible notes to that, it just means that they were so protected. They were so just in their own little bubble with God in that fire that not only were they not burned, but there was no evidence of a fire, literally none. And I think about how many times I've just been in the vicinity of a bonfire and put the same hoodie on the next day or something. And I'm like, yep, you can tell I've been at a bonfire. The fact that they were in the fire and came out and didn't even smell like it, to me is a nod saying they were completely encapsulated and protected by God. And I feel like they would have never experienced that and been a part of that miracle if their faith had not led them into that fire. And so the biggest challenge that this story presented me this week was, could I say that about my own faith? And would I be willing to do that? And the other thing is just the faithfulness and the provision and the protection of God, that not only are you not going to get burned, but you are so safe and secure that it's not even going to touch you. It's just completely, you are unaffected. And so that's something that spoke to my heart this week, and I hope it encourages you as well. God, we just thank you for our time tonight. I just thank you for your word and this story of faith. And God, I just pray that you would strengthen our faith today, God, that any places that feel weak or any pitfalls we might have in our own spirits and our own minds, God, I just pray that you would fill in the gaps with your Holy Spirit, that you would strengthen our faith to take the next step, to take scary steps, and to just be confident and know that you got us every step of the way. And so, God, we just praise you and we thank you. It's in your name we pray. Amen.